Come to order. Today, the Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Representative Matthew Martinez, Monte Vista, Colorado.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Schiebel, please call the roll.
Representatives Amabile, Armagost, Bacon, Representative Bacon,
Excused.
Byrd, Bockenfeld, Basenecker, Bottoms, Bradfield, Bradley, Brown. Representative Brown is here. Catlin. Representative Catlin. Rep. Catlin's excused. Doherty. DeGraff. Degree Kennedy. Rep. Degree Kennedy is excused. Dixon. Duran. English. Epps. Evans. Frizzell. Froelich. Garcia. Gonzalez Gutierrez is excused. Hamrick. Hartsook. Representative Harrod's excused. Holtorf. Judah. Joseph. Kipp. Leader. Lindsay. Linstead. Luck. Rep. Luck is excused. Lukens is here. Lynch. Minority Leader Lynch. Yeah. He's excused. Mabry. Rep. Mabry's here. Marshall. Martinez. Morrow. McCormick. Rep. McCormick's excused. McLaughlin. Rep. McLaughlin. Okay, also excused. Michelson Janae. Ortiz is excused. That's right. Parenti. Puglisi. I got you. Ricks. Representative Ricks. No. Ricks is excused. Charbini is here. Sirota. Snyder. Soper. Representative Soper. No Soper either. Soper's excused. Story. Taggart. Titone. Valdez. Velasco. Do you see Velasco either? Representative Velasco. No. Velasco's excused. Vigil. Weinberg. Weissman. Wilford. Wilson. Winter. Woodrow. Woodrow's here. Young. And Madam Speaker.
Here. With 54 present, 11 excused, we do have a quorum. Members, we have several of our body on their way from Water Resources Committee this morning, so we should be seeing them trickle in just a moment. Representative Martinez, I think you might have yet another motion for us today,
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and it's an honor to serve with you.
and an honor to serve with you.
Well, members, we're going to stick with food because that seems like we're almost at the tipping point. So, also in the San Luis Valley, you get a lot of cattle ranchers and a lot of beef and a lot of steak that comes through. So I like steak. I like potatoes. I like chile. So if you like steak, you like your burgers, then I urge an aye vote. So I move that the Journal of Tuesday, March 7, 2023, be approved as corrected by the Chief Clerk.
Members, you have heard the motion that the journal be approved as corrected by the Chief Clerk. All those in favor say aye. Representative Holtorf. All those opposed, no. No. Members. The motion is adopted. Announcements and introductions. Representative Michelson-Janae.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Public and Behavioral Health and Human Services, listen up. We have no bills this afternoon, so you have the afternoon off. No Public and Behavioral Health and Human Services today.
Thank you. Representative Weissman. Oh, Representative Froelich.
Oh,
Representative Weissman. Musical chairs this morning.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Having no bills is not a problem that the Judiciary Committee usually grapples with, so we will do 3 this afternoon. Representative Luck will not be able to present her bill, so 1159 will not be heard today. We will follow the calendar after that. We will first hear 1199, followed by 1178, followed by 1206. Again, in order, 1199, 1178, 1206, not 1159, House Judiciary 130, room 112. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Froelich.
thank you, Madam Speaker. The Transportation, Housing, and Local Government Committee meets at 1:30 for one bill, Senate Bill 57, LSBA.
Thank you. Representative Kipp.
Good morning, Energy and Environment members. Today we have the last, I think, of our briefings for this session over in LSBA. 10 minutes upon adjournment. We are going to actually start promptly, so please try and be there. In addition to that, I want to make sure everybody knows that tomorrow Energy and Environment will be starting at 11 a.m. and we will be hearing 2 bills. That will be 1161 for action only and 1210. But just make note of the different time tomorrow, 11 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative McLaughlin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If you heard what's going on in environment and energy, that's also what's going on in education. Tomorrow, everybody on the Education Committee, we start at 11. We will be hearing House Bill 1211 and House Bill 1191. Today, we are listening to House Bill 1198 and 1207. So today will be at our regular time at adjournment. And Thursday, we will be starting at 11 and not 1:30. So thank you very much.
Representative Amabile.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's business today, and we are meeting on adjournment. We have one bill, but I do need everybody to be in the room at 10 minutes after adjournment. Tomorrow, our afternoon business committee will be meeting at 11. And we will be hearing 2 bills tomorrow, and I will give you those bill numbers tomorrow. But the bill for today is 1174. Be there 10 minutes after adjournment. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Snyder.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. House Finance will meet immediately upon adjournment tomorrow to hear two bills, 1186 and 1054. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative McCormick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to let you all know that I have a family member in town visiting from Annapolis, Maryland, who is my brother. He is over here in the back of the room, so please go say hi. He is probably one of your best Top Gun fighter pilots in the U.S. Navy. So welcome to my brother.
Representative Judah.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, today is Refugee Advocate Day at the Capitol. This annual event is an opportunity for refugees and refugee advocates to visit the Capitol to learn about our work and to share information with us, their elected leaders, about the refugee resettlement in Colorado. Colorado has a very long and proud history of resettling refugees and celebrating their invaluable culture and economic contributions to our state. Refugees and their children are our neighbors, teachers, healthcare professionals, friends, and even our colleagues in this chamber. They are what makes Colorado the beautiful, vibrant state it is. In Colorado, there are 4 refugee resettlement agencies and dozens of community-based and ethnic community-based organizations that work alongside newcomers to help ensure the success of our new Coloradans. Many of these organizations are present at the Capitol today, and many of our newest refugee neighbors. I invite you to take time to visit and learn more at the West Foyer. There will be lunch, so please come when there's always food. And the food is Thai, Cuban, and Middle Eastern food prepared by chefs and caterers from Our Bazaar Global Kitchen Collective. And we welcome them today in the gallery. If you could please stand, members, if you could please welcome our refugees and their resettlement agencies.
Thank you. Representative Kipp.
Hey everybody, I almost forgot. Council of State Governments is still here in the building with us, the Western region. For anybody who is a WLA, Western Legislative Academy alumni, or if you're in your first 4 years of service and still eligible to take the Western Legislative Academy, there will be a lunch in 109 today in the basement, so try and show up if you can, noonish.
Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We had the pleasure this morning of breakfast being sponsored by the Colorado Oil and Gas Association. I want to thank the more than 100,000 Colorado oil and gas employees, thousands of which are in my district, House District 63 in Northeast Colorado. Every day, these hardworking citizens are developing energy resources cleaner, better, safer than anywhere on the planet. Good jobs providing energy we all use every day to thrive. Every one of us in this building right now and in this chamber has relied on Colorado oil and gas to get up in the morning, to get to this building, and to do almost everything you did, including eating your breakfast and getting in your car and coming to the state capitol. U.S. national security depends on oil and gas that is homegrown. Oil and gas will be needed for many years to come, and we in this state need to face that national security reality. If you care about the environment, you need to consider clean Colorado energy. Just so you know, Colorado's natural gas is the cleanest burning natural gas in the world.
Rep. Holtorf, I appreciate the announcement of our oil and gas partners being in the building today.
Thank you, Madam
Ask you to
Speaker.
move along. Thank you.
There, thank you very much. I just want to remind you, remember Colorado Oil and Gas is Colorado Clean. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Joseph.
Madam Speaker, it is an honor to serve with you.
And an honor to serve with you.
Thank you. Members, I just wanted to make an announcement in honor of International Women's Day. We have a lot of community members from Boulder who are here today because ultimately I know and we all know that all issues are local issues. So today we have the League of Women Voters of Boulder County. Please stand. We also have with us the Democratic Women of Boulder County. We also have the YWCA Boulder County. We also have the Boulder County Democrats chair in the House today. We also have two council members from Boulder, Council Member Nicole Spear and Lauren Folkerts. And the work that we do could not be possible without other partners who are also working in the space of protecting families and children. We have the owner of Mosaic Muse LLC also here with us in the House. Thank you very much.
Members, we have tributes. Representative Ricks.
Can all the women join us in the well? Madam Speaker, we have a tribute. We ask that it be read at length.
Mr. Schiebel, please read our tribute.
The House of Representatives convened in the 74th General Assembly hereby recognizes International Women's Day, March 8, 2023. The Colorado House of Representatives honors and celebrates International Women's Day 2023. Originating in 1911, International Women's Day is a day to celebrate the social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of women across the globe, raise awareness of bias against women, and to renew the commitment to accelerate women's equality. The missions of International Women's Day are to build workplaces where women thrive, elevate the visibility of women creatives, forge women's empowerment worldwide, forge women's equality in technology, celebrate the women forging change, and to elevate women's health. Since the late 1800s and early 1900s, when women fought for the right to vote and for equal pay, the path to women's equality has been long and challenging. The Colorado House of Representatives celebrates International Women's Day 2023 and honors the efforts to make positive gains for girls and women worldwide. On request of Representative Nikita Ricks, given this 8th day of March 2023, State Capitol, Denver.
Representative Ricks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, members. You may be seated. Members, every year on March 8th, we celebrate International Women's Day to recognize the social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of women throughout the world. Joining us today in the gallery is a collection of women from throughout the state who represent the best of Colorado. I'm pleased to welcome all of you. Thank you for being here, and I'm so glad we get to celebrate the accomplishments of women at home and abroad on this very day. Today, Colorado has the second highest percentage of female and gender-expansive legislators at the state level at 51%. And across the country, nearly 1/3 of all state legislators are women. We are living in unprecedented times for gender representation in positions of power, and as co-chair of the Democratic Women's Caucus, I'm proud to champion the causes of women and gender-expansive people throughout the state. This year, the House Democratic Caucus continues to be a majority women and gender-expansive people. And looking around this room, I also want to recognize the contributions of women who represent the important first in Colorado history. The first trans lawmaker, the first Muslim lawmaker, the first African immigrant lawmaker, the first Haitian American lawmaker, and the first Mexican American lawmaker elected to the General Assembly. We still have a great deal left to do before we achieve true gender equity and parity in Colorado and across the globe. Colorado still has not seen a female governor. We still have not had a female president in the United States. We are excited about Kamala Harris, who we got to see earlier this week on Monday. That was amazing to see a female vice president who really exemplifies, how we want to see women rise up in power. But we do have faith, though, that we can harness the power of our representation to create bold, lasting change for the generations after us. We encourage women not to grow complacent of our accomplishments thus far, but to continue to boldly step forward and seize the moment and claim the future.
Representative Joseph.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to my colleague for joining me in the well. This year, the United Nations theme for International Women's Day is innovation and technology and gender equality, and specifically how education in the digital space is used to achieve general equality and empowerment for all women and girls. The significance of this theme is twofold. First, it speaks to the digital gap and its impact on economic and social inequities between the genders. Second, it addresses the importance of protecting women and girls in the digital space and gender-based violence online. The exclusion of women from the digital world has resulted in more than $1 trillion of unrealized potentials, gross domestic product in middle and low-income countries over the past 10 years. One example of this lost potential is the systemic gender bias that steers women away from careers in the sciences, engineering, and mathematics. Globally, the majority of students in post-secondary education programs are women. However, women only make up only 35% of STEM students. This statistics also translates to the global workforce in the science and engineering fields, of which only about 20% are women. The bias in education is also compounded by the fact that the work environment in this field is often exclusionary and inflexible to the needs of women professionals. The exclusion of women is also reflected in online life. While the internet offers important learning and career opportunities, it also exposes women and girls to harassment and violence. A study of 51 countries showed that nearly 9 out of 10 women have experienced online violence, choose to limit their online activities, increasing the digital gender divide. I have personally heard from many of my constituents about how online hate is affecting women and girls, as well as transgender and LGBTQ+ community members. The pandemic increased our time online and therefore the isolation of our youth who have been spending more time online on an environment that may be less than welcoming. As leaders, we should take seriously the evidence shown that technology and the algorithm that create our online world can be harmful to women, girls, and our LGBTQ+ community. It is critical that we do our part to ensure that technology and the internet are used to advance women's empowerment rather than stifling it. This means acknowledging and refuting the biases that discourages women from participating in the sciences and engineering fields, encouraging women and girls to participate in shaping technology and the online world to reflect their own lived experiences, embracing intersectionality and the validity of the experience of trans women and women of color, and celebrating women who speak up for our interests and blaze a trail for others to follow. I am proud to be part of a caucus with so many trailblazing women, and I'm grateful for standing with them today. Thank you.
Representative Velasco.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On International Women's Day, we want to double our commitment to serving everyone, to celebrating diversity, and to making sure that we also elevate the mosaic of culture that is Colorado.
Excellent. Thank you all.
Speaker McCluskey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. It is an honor to serve with you.
It's an honor to serve with you.
Members, I have a very special tribute and ask that it be read at length.
The Senate and House of Representatives convened in the 74th General Assembly hereby recognizes and celebrates Emily Warner and Women Airline Pilots Day. Emily Warner was born in Denver, lived in Grand County for over 25 years, and has since been memorialized with the Granby and Grand County Airport being named Emily Warner Field. 50 years ago, Emily Warner shattered the glass ceiling of the U.S. airline flight deck as Frontier Airlines' first woman pilot, and in 1976, she became America's first female airline captain. Captain Emily Warner has been inducted into the Women in Aviation International Pioneer Hall of Fame, the National Women's and National Aviation Halls of Fame, and the Irish American Hall of Fame, and her Frontier Airlines uniform hangs in the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum. Today, almost 30,000 women airline pilots are flying passengers worldwide, comprising nearly 30% of the number of employed airline pilots. The Colorado General Assembly is proud to honor Emily Warner and the legacy she created in Colorado and around the world, and hereby declares March 8th as Celebrate Emily Warner and Women Airline Pilots Day. On request of Representative Julie McCluskey and Senator Dylan Roberts, given this 8th day of March 2023, State Capitol, Denver.
Speaker McCluskey.
Thank you. Members, please take your seats. Today, Senator Roberts and I and the women of the Western Slope are very proud to honor not only International Women's Day, but Women's Pilots Day. I am here to recognize Emily Warner, the most celebrated female airline pilot in the world, because she paved the way for women and promoted gender equality in all professions. Today, we are joined by members of the Colorado Civil Air Patrol, Colorado Pilots Association, International 99s, Colorado 99s, Grand County Historical Association, the Colorado Aviation Historical Society, Military Women Pilots, Women Airline Pilots, Women in Aviation International, Colorado Women's Hall of Fame, Colorado Division of Aeronautics, and many more amazing groups and individuals. I ask that all those representing these organizations please stand to be recognized. As the resolution emphasized, Emily Warner achieved many firsts. 50 years ago in 1973, Warner became the first woman pilot for Frontier Airlines, the first female pilot to join the Airline Pilots Association in 1974, the first female air captain in 1976, and commanded the first ever all-female crew in 1986. Feels a little bit like that in the House right now. Warner truly shattered the glass ceiling and has had an immense, lasting influence on the aviation industry for women in all professions. However, her journey to achieve these firsts did not come easily. After amassing multiple FAA certificates and ratings, Warner applied for a pilot's job but was not chosen. Instead, she became a flight instructor from 1961 to 67, and during this time, she trained many male students who went on to pilot for various airlines. In 73, Warner applied for an airline pilot's position with Frontier Airlines. Yet, she was still not chosen. And without giving up, marched into Frontier's head office, got an interview with the vice president of flight operations, and was quickly offered a job. Warner was a pilot for 42 years, and during this time, she amassed more than 21,000 flying hours. She pioneered the way for a more equitable workplace and inspired many to believe their dreams were reachable. Today, almost 6% of U.S. airline pilots are women. I hope that number grows, and I hope that Warner's legacy is forever honored and will continue to promote equality in all professions. We often look to the skies for inspiration. Today, we look to Emily Warner. Thank you. Thank you, members. Madam Majority Leader. Members, our first order of business this morning is third reading of bills, final passage. Mr. Schiebel. Please read the title to House Bill 1039.
House Bill 1039 by Representative Byrd, also Senators Rodriguez and Winter F., concerning a requirement that electric load-serving entities periodically report about the adequacy of their electric resources and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move House Bill 1039 on third reading, final passage.
The motion before us is the adoption of House Bill 1039 on third reading, final passage. Mr. Schiebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Luck, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Luck votes no. Representative Ortiz is excused. Please close the machine. With 49 aye, 13 no, and 3 excused, House Bill 1039 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title to House Bill 1185.
House Bill 1185 by Representatives Doherty and Woodrow, also Senator Rodriguez, concerning procedures relating to the replacement of elected officials.
Madam Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move House Bill 1185 on third reading and final passage.
The motion before us is the adoption of House Bill 1185 on third reading, final passage. Mr. Schiebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Luck, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Luck votes no. Please close the machine. With 48 aye, 14 no, and 3 excused, House Bill 1185 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title to House Bill 1002.
House Bill 1002 by Representatives Mabry and Judah, also Senator Roberts, concerning the affordability of epinephrine autoinjectors and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move House Bill 1002 on third reading and final passage.
The motion before us is the adoption of House Bill 1002 on third reading, final passage. Mr. Schiebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Luck, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Luck votes no. Please close the machine. With 47 aye, 15 no, and 3 excused, House Bill 1002 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title to Senate Bill 84.
Senate Bill 84 by Senators Marchman and Gonzalez, also Representative Young, concerning the calculation of full-time employment for teachers at higher education institutions for purposes of the Federal Public Loan Forgiveness Program.
Madam Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move Senate Bill 84 on third reading and final passage.
The motion before us is the final adoption of Senate Bill 84 on third reading, final passage. Mr. Schiebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Luck, how do you vote?
No. No.
Representative Luck votes no. Please close the machine. With 44 aye, 18 no, and 3 excused, Senate Bill 84 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Madam Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move to lay over House Bill 1114 until July 1st, 2023, per sponsor request.
Seeing no objection, House Bill 1114 will be laid over until July 1st, 2023. Madam Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move that the following bills be made special orders at 9:45 a.m. House Bill 1042, House Bill 1179, and Senate Bill 50.
Seeing no objection, the bills listed by the Majority Leader will be made special orders at 9:45 a.m. Representative Woodrow. Members, you have heard the motion. Seeing no objection, the House will now resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of special orders. Representative Woodrow will take the chair.
The committee will come to order. With your unanimous consent, the bills will be read by title unless there's a request for reading a bill at length. Committee reports are printed and in your bill folders. Floor amendments will be shown on the screen and on your iPads. Bills will be laid over upon motion of the majority leader, and the coat roll is relaxed. Now, Mr. Schiebel, please read the title of House Bill 1042.
House Bill 1042 by Representatives Bacon and Charbini, also Senator Gonzalez, concerning narrowing admissibility standards for juvenile statements to protect the voluntariness of such statements.
Representative Bacon.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I move House Bill 1042 in the Judiciary Committee report.
There's also
and
an appropriations.
And the Appropriations Committee report.
To the Appropriations report.
Thank you. In appropriations, we not only received funding for the training at the request of law enforcement, we also added additional funding to be able to support law enforcement in working with young people with intellectual disabilities. And so the appropriation was given to be able to broaden that per ADA specifications, again, at the request of Post. So we ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion on the Appropriations Committee report? Seeing none, members, the question before us is the adoption of the Appropriations Committee report. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Appropriations Committee report is passed. To the Judiciary Committee report, Representative Bacon.
Thank you, members.
Oh, my apologies. Assistant Majority Leader Bacon.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the Judiciary Committee, it's important to note that we added some language, particularly around talking about
the difference between deception and untruthful information. We also added language to say that that the untruthful statements have to be known, and quite honestly, we gave law enforcement the benefit of the doubt. If they don't know it at the time, that does not count against them. We also added language to say that this bill only applies to custodial interrogations, not things prior to. And so that's what we added to the bill in the Judiciary Committee. I urge and I vote.
Is there any further discussion on the Judiciary Committee report? Seeing none, Representative Holtorf. See? Representative Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, to the Judiciary Committee report. I would like to move Amendment L008 and ask that it be properly displayed.
Are we counting that as a proper motion? He said I'd like to move. Is that good?
Yeah, so I move Amendment L008 and ask that it be properly displayed.
That is a proper motion. L008 has been moved and properly displayed. Representative Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So all this does is just adds four words to the Judiciary Committee report, specifically page 1, line 17. And so what this says is that when we're talking about these statements or beliefs, that they have to be material to the investigation. So what this does is this just narrows the scope of the conversation at hand by saying this has to actually apply to whatever the custodial interrogation is. So I'll give you an example. If we're talking about, an auto theft, what this would mean is that the applicability of the prohibitions in this bill would have to apply to any conversations about the auto theft. This couldn't be, or those statements couldn't be disqualified if there was an untruth from another unrelated conversation. So if we're talking an auto theft, then if something comes up about, maybe the kid is not going to school, that wouldn't trigger the prohibitions in this bill. So for that reason, I ask for a yes vote to L008.
Is there any further discussion? Assistant Majority Leader Bacon.
Thank
I'll
you.
get it right soon, I promise.
Thank you. Members, we believe we're going to ask a no on this amendment. The question of materiality is unknown in interrogations, and that wouldn't necessarily support the child, their parent, or even an attorney, because that information would be held close to the chest for law enforcement. Further, the questions of whether things are material are actually hammered out in pretrial, particularly around suppression hearings, so we're going to ask for a no vote.
Is there any further discussion on Amendment L008? Seeing none, members, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L008. All in favor say aye. All opposed say no. The noes have it. L008 is lost. Back to the Judiciary Committee report. Is there any further discussion? Committee report. Seeing none, the question before us, members, is the adoption of the Judiciary Committee report. All in favor say aye. All opposed say no. The ayes have it. The Judiciary Committee report is passed. To the bill, Assistant Majority Leader Bacon.
Thank you, members. So we would like to briefly spell out what the bill does. The bill particularly says that the intentional use of untruths is a harm, particularly to young people's Fifth Amendment rights. Ultimately, what this bill does is it creates a procedural breakdown and a standard, if you will, about what may or may not be voluntary from a young person. So the bill says that if a young person is intentionally lied to during custodial interrogation, and that is only one space, and custodial interrogation means they are in custody per law and statute that we've had in the books for a long time, where they cannot leave, that is custodial interrogation, and that young people in that space should be able to be interviewed, if not interrogated, without the intentional use of deception. Not the use of information that law enforcement thinks might be true. I just wanted to be able to put that out there as well, as we created a carve-out. In the event a young person is intentionally lied to by law enforcement or an agent, we also narrowed the definition of agent to be anybody who's at the direction of law enforcement, which is consistent with agency law that's been on statute for a long time as well. In the event a young person was intentionally lied to in their interrogation, a defense attorney can raise that at a suppression hearing, and the starting point will be with the presumption that intentional deception was used. A district attorney will have the opportunity, using preponderance of evidence standard, to prove that the statement was not involuntarily given or that the intentional use of deception did not happen. In the event a judge does find that intentional use of deception occurred, the district attorney still has an opportunity with the preponderance of evidence to show that the statement was still voluntary and that it can be used in court. So members, I'm sharing with you what the procedure is, because the bill is not dispositive in saying that the minute someone lies, the statement is out. It still has to go through an evidentiary standard with the judge, and there's still opportunities to be able to make a case. Further, the bill requires that custodial interrogations with youth are recorded. You may not know, there's only one place in statute and where that's required, and that's with sexual assault cases. And even though you hear that law enforcement may wear body cams, they're not required to wear them on issues that aren't felonies, or if they're not interviewing people who aren't in jail or prison or in corrections. And so this requires that all of those interviews also be recorded, and that tape can be used at an evidential hearing. So members, this is to note that young people are definitely in a different developmental stage and place in their life when it comes to understanding not only what is truth, but understanding relationships with adults who may be intimidating, who we all teach that we shouldn't lie to, but despite what you say, if adults still come to young people and saying that they're lying, they may be put in particular the positions of pressure. We also know that from associations, international police associations, and those who forensically train law enforcement, that when you use deception in an interview, it is more leading to get to a particular outcome than using open-ended questions where you get information about the crime. And so we want to change that practice. The last thing that we'll note is that this bill is particularly about statements used against the child. It does not mean that you cannot use the statements in investigations of other people. It does not mean that you cannot use the statements in investigations of ongoing things that may need attention, like if you're looking for a missing person. But what it does say is that if that happens, the defense and the child may be able to take that statement to court for an evidentiary hearing. I will also say sometimes we have heard this term exigent circumstances. Legally, exigent circumstances is a term that can qualify you for a warrant, and that means like to search. And so exigent circumstances are like, I hear someone screaming, I should be able to enter the house. But constitutionally speaking, even fruit of the poisonous tree is that if those exigent circumstances conditions came up because someone gave a statement involuntarily, it's still illegal. So we want to be sure we don't cross those lines. However, it doesn't mean that you cannot use the statement in the course of investigation. And so we'll end there because I'm sure we'll hear more conversation, and I'm sure this is riveting. Thank you so much, everybody.
Representative Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to lay a little bit of background about how we would actually come to the situation that the bill describes. The bill uses the term custodial arrest. So what a custodial arrest means is that somebody has to be in custody, and there's a whole ton of case law, all the way from the federal Supreme Court and all of the lower courts. There's a ton of case law that describes what does it mean to be in custody. Custody means that a person has to feel that they are not free to leave the situation. So that can be anywhere from surrounded by a whole bunch of police officers, but you're out on the streets. That can be handcuffs. That can be, you've actually been arrested, taken back to the police station, or you voluntarily drove to the police station, but you're now in an interview room at the police station. So custodial means the person feels they are not free to leave. And then the interrogation part of that means that questions are being asked about the particular crime that's or suspected crime that is under investigation. Now, to conduct a custodial interrogation is that very famous case, Miranda. Miranda says that before a police officer can even begin to talk to somebody in a custodial interrogation, they have to give the Miranda advisements. In the case of a juvenile, those Miranda advisements not only have to be given to the juvenile, but a parent or guardian also has to receive those advisements, and that parent or guardian also has to agree to continue the conversation. So before we can even get to the situation described in this bill, there's already been a Miranda advisement given that lets the person that's being spoken to know, hey, you don't have to talk. If you don't want to say anything, you don't have to say anything. If you do choose to talk, everything that you say can and be used against you. You have the right to have an attorney present. If you can't afford an attorney will be appointed to you. All of those Miranda protections are already in place before we even get to the situation that's covered in this bill. Not only that, those Miranda protections have also been given not just to the juvenile, but they've also been given to a parent or guardian that has to also agree to continue the conversation. So we already have very robust protections in place to ensure that a forced confession or a forced conversation is not occurring. Now, what the bill talks about is using untruths. The overwhelming vast majority of police departments do not use this. This is not the initial tool in the toolbox that they go to. I've seen a lot of these interviews happen in the course of my career. And so the way it typically works, especially with a juvenile, is the officer is going to be asking open-ended questions. Because again, as a result of previous legislation, these interviews are already required to be recorded. So the officer knows that, hey, I have to ask open-ended questions because everything that happens in this interview is going to be analyzed in the courts. Every word is going to be recorded. And so if it looks like the officer is providing leading questions or trying to plant a particular idea in a juvenile's head, that stuff is already going to be identified and screened out as a result of the good work that's already been done in Colorado to increase the quality and the quality assurance of law enforcement investigations. If an untruth is ever used, they are also used in that exact same vein. They are a broad, open-ended suggestion in which a specific idea is not planted in anyone's mind or anyone's head. And they're almost always used just to keep a conversation going. So if the conversation's happening and it starts to stall, that's when an officer might say something like, hey, we all know that there's lots of cameras, I'll just go watch the camera footage. No specific idea is planted, no specific direction is given, it's just an open-ended statement that, look, there's probably camera footage out there and I'm going to go watch it. And those are things that are done in order to just try to keep the conversation going. Now, in committee, we heard a lot of data about how forced confessions result in convictions later being overturned. So I did a little bit of digging on this. I did some analysis on how many false confessions have been overturned in the state of Colorado. And the numbers that I found from the University of Michigan were actually kind of shocking to me, because since 1995, we've only had 11 convictions overturned in Colorado. Now, that's not just...
I'm sorry, Rep. Evans, just one second. Hey, folks, it's getting a little loud in here. If we could take our discussions to the back or off the floor, that'd be great. Representative Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've had 11 convictions overturned in Colorado since 1995 as a result of a false confession. Now, that's not just juvenile convictions. Those are all convictions, so that includes adults. So when you drill down into that data further, the data shows that there have only been 2 convictions overturned as a result of a false conviction. And of those 2, only one of those was a juvenile conviction, and that particular juvenile conviction had a bunch of poor police work that was ultimately resulted in some public misconduct allegations against the officers that were involved in this. So since 1995, the situation that this bill is trying to address has only happened one time, and that one time that it happened, it was as a result of poor police work that was identified, caught, and handled through additional disciplinary processes against that poor police work through the system. So, my concern ultimately with this bill is that almost 30 years of data shows that Colorado law enforcement is doing a good job. We are not having a situation where we're having false confessions that are being overturned in court. It's only happened one time, and that was a result of poor police work that was then held accountable through a variety of other mechanisms. What this bill, my concern is, what this bill does is it just further ties the hands of law enforcement, and it ties the law enforcement's hand, unfortunately, at a time where we're seeing rising rates of juveniles being victimized in our community. You can look at the news, you can look at the data, and you can see the stories of how our kids are unfortunately victimizing other kids. And so we always have to find that balance of how do we protect the rights of the accused, but how do we also protect the rights of our victims? You know, unfortunately in my career, I've seen a lot of times where we have juveniles who are victimized by these situations. And if we tie law enforcement's hand in an area that the data shows is not actually happening, we tie law enforcement's hands, we ultimately create a situation in which juvenile victims of the increasing violence cannot receive justice. And for those reasons, I urge a no vote on this bill.
Thank you. Representative Holtorf. Representative Holtorf. See how that worked out? Representative Holtorf, to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With this bill, once again, we are hog-tying the hands of law enforcement. Every year, the men and women in blue continue to have tools taken out of their toolbox. Now, the premise of the bill is noble. My colleague has pointed out how law enforcement already does Miranda, and they do everything procedurally proper under current statute. But here's the problem, Mr. Chair, and ladies and gentlemen of this chamber. Juvenile violent crime is on the rise in Colorado. We have juveniles that are committing crimes, very serious crimes. Those that would be committed or should not be committed by juveniles because they're adult-level crimes. Yet the youth are doing these things. and creating more violence and more victims of crime in this state. And if there's one thing I have definitely become acutely aware of, is the rising crime rates, not only across the country, but right here in Colorado. But let me get to the specifics. Many researchers are looking into the links between violent crime and teenagers spending more time physically alone or virtually connected. Well, this is to the bill, ladies and gentlemen, because we're talking about standards for juvenile statements for juveniles that have committed or potentially allegedly committed crimes. And law enforcement has to deal with, they're on the front lines of dealing with this. And this particular piece of legislation ties their hands. It helps public defenders. It helps potentially youth that have committed crimes not be charged with those crimes. Now, there are some statistics that are very important that I think people need to be aware of, because the bill sponsor talked about children. Children are children, and children are youth. But criminals and violent crime conducted by juvenile youth now all of a sudden are not children. They are youth, and I think the buzzword is criminally affected youth, or now judicially affected youth. Somebody that now is in trouble, and their path to getting in trouble and finding their way into the hands of law enforcement oftentimes is of their own decision, of their own action, and if they are found guilty of the crime, of their own criminal negligence. Violent crime that lands kids and teenagers in Colorado Youth Correction System are rising, accounting for 41% of admissions in 2022. From homicides to sexual assault to robberies at gunpoint, the violent crimes committed by young people has sharply risen during the past 5 years. There are sociologists that accredit this to consequences of physical isolation and long-term effects and public policy decisions due to the coronavirus pandemic. So if this statistic is true, and if we are dealing with more of these crimes at the hand of young people, why would we want to tie the hands of law enforcement? Because I stand here in this chamber every day backing the men and women in blue, having family members that are serving in law enforcement. And they are professionals. These aren't folks that are trying to hoodwink the youth through devious tactics. In large measure, that is an overstatement that this is happening, and this bill applies to that. Now, there are exceptions to every rule, of course. Here's another statistic I think that's important. The percentage of young people sent to Division of Youth Service facilities for a violent crime was 35% in 2021. Now, this is a violent crime. Let's talk about what those may be. Homicides, sexual assaults, robberies at gunpoint. This is serious stuff. This includes 54 young people held in detention for felony homicide, 47 for attempted homicide, and 40 for sexual assault. These aren't children. These aren't innocent children. These are young people that have chosen to commit these heinous crimes. Hold on, let me talk again about it. Felony homicide. attempted homicide, sexual assault. Across the state, the level of violence we're seeing among young people is increasing, says the Youth Services Director. And I will
Representative
keep his-
Holtorf, I am going to ask you to bring it back to the bill which deals with youth interrogations. So I do appreciate your statistics on youth crime. If you could tie that back to the bill, that'd be fantastic.
Yes, Mr. Chair. You see, the proper adjudication of these youth crimes begins on the front lines with law enforcement and the questioning of potential perpetrators of these crimes. Youth perpetrators, if you like. I think in law enforcement they call them perps. Perpetrators. Something has gone wrong and these people have found themselves facing law enforcement. I object, Mr. Chair, to taking tools away from the men and women in blue or restricting their ability to find out what is the truth. What happened in this crime? To stand on the side of victims and not further empower criminals is a concern. Now, youth correction systems, which I believe there's 15 state-operated facilities, can hold youth from 10 to 21 years of age. And this particular bill directly affects, in many cases, which youth go to detention and which youth do not go to detention. Now, my colleague just said that this is not a problem in Colorado. Statistically, evidentially, for those lawyers in the room, I think there's been one case since 1984. I'll let someone that was on the committee speak to that. But here we go again, trying to bring a solution to the state capitol that is not a direct problem here in Colorado, and does once again tie the hands of the men and women in blue who are on the front lines. And ladies and gentlemen, I will tell you, they're tired of it. You want to know why you can't keep people in law enforcement? It's stuff like this. These kind of bills, many of them, taking away those tools. Unfortunately, the population in the state's youth correction system continues to grow, and there's more violent offenders. And I would argue that most, if not all, of these violent offenders have been handled correctly and properly under the law. And they are not there by some accident or incident or some high level of coercion. Now, there may be a few cases, very few. And that's what the appeal system is for. I just pointed out that the increase is 12% now over 1 year. At this time, I'm going to allow other colleagues to speak. Some of them that were on the committee have referenced that this particular bill was presented in for more very important and impactful commentary on why this bill is not good for Colorado.
Assistant Majority Leader Bacon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members. I just wanted a chance to have an opportunity to speak before we hear additional debate. I want to say, as a sponsor and also for myself, that this bill nor I am anti-law enforcement. I too have law enforcement in my family. This bill nor I am anti-victim. In fact, unfortunately, If it is true that crime is twice as high in neighborhoods like mine, that means we are also twice as likely to have victims, including myself. And part of being able to address those issues are to be able to utilize and trust law enforcement, as well as to be aware and understand our rights. We are often talked to about the Constitution. The majority of the amendments in the Bill of Rights are about due process, and particularly the notion that you are innocent until proven guilty. Just because you were brought into a police station doesn't mean you did it, nor does it mean that you created the crime of murder. There are other levels of crimes, and our system is supposed to protect our liberty, which then suggests people should have the best chance at it, especially young people. Our communities are robust. They have a number of stakeholders, including parents who are unsure of what to do if they are brought into a police station. We were very particular to say, this is about a practice, not a profession. We are very particular to bring in language that says intentional use of deception, not that you don't know it's untrue yet. We're talking about the intentional act of lying. We are not suggesting that it happens every day, but in the event it does, we need to err on the side of our liberties, as well as this notion that we are innocent until proven guilty, and that we don't have tools that kind of skip over that. For young people and for families, and we heard earlier about Miranda, yes, parents have to be in the room. Parents have to be in the room for competency, to help people understand what's happening, especially the kids. But that doesn't mean they are attorneys. And they're in a room trying to egg their child on to tell the truth, but if that is at the behest of something that one person in the room knows is false, then that's unfair to the families. And also the parents to be put in a position with their own children to perpetuate an untruth. For what it's worth, there are reasons why we have Miranda warnings. There are reasons why we don't do things in interrogations anymore, because we learned from them. And we heard in committee that it's not just actually one of the children who was falsely accused testified, and also we heard from a woman who was so pressured to say something happened that it didn't. She didn't go to jail, but her parents did. And we should care about that as a matter of public policy. For trust to work, it means we have to believe what you are saying is true. And that's why when you find out that it isn't, it is devastating, not only to the people in the room, but to whole communities, so much so that people like myself who have also been victims worry about if we'll get support. So how can we build something in partnership that we know we can work towards? And we did spend time with law enforcement. We spent time with investigators from across the country who said this is a step that moves in the direction not only for this practice, but in trust, because you also need people to help trust to bring down this crime that we heard about. But if people do not feel, or they're unsure about what to expect when they go in the space, we cannot solve these problems. So again, I want to say for the record, I do not get to be categorized as someone who does not care about victims. I do not get to be categorized as someone who does not know this profession or practice. I am asking on behalf of all of us who are in this community that have to make it work, that we understand what our expectations are. We know there are people we can trust with badges. There are people we need that for, and we look forward to that. But children and parents need to know what the rules are in the vein of the Fifth Amendment, as well as you are innocent until you're proven guilty, and that the tools used are community tools. They don't just belong to one stakeholder. So I will ask for that grace from this chamber to not put us as sponsors in a box. We live here too. Thank you.
Representative Armagast.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to present another law enforcement perspective, like my colleague, Representative Evans. In this case, I do see what the sponsors of this bill are trying to get at with what was brought up in committee. Some of the examples were to the effect of convincing somebody that they were signing something that was not an admission of guilt, but were basically signing away a confession. And while I have taken part in interview and interrogation in law enforcement and as a military police investigator, there's a national model that we follow, and it's an extensive training that investigators and interrogators go through to learn the art of interview and interrogation. With that, of course, there are bad actors in that, but to show that we can actually count that on one finger, how many times that's happened and been overturned in Colorado, I think it's a dangerous overstep to apply this to all law enforcement officers and taking away tools of their interview and interrogation techniques, of being able to not deceive somebody, but there are techniques that, based on perspective, can be seen as deceptive techniques of getting information from somebody, whether it was on a crime that they committed or information on a crime that somebody else committed. That information is admissible in court. That information is recorded. That information is divulged with juveniles having a parent or guardian present with the ability to sign their Miranda rights and with the right of having an attorney present before they answer any questions or say anything. So while we already have these safeguards in place, this is something that further ties the hands of law enforcement in their ability to get information to hold people accountable for crimes they or someone else committed, but also keeping our streets safe from those offenders, not giving them more advantage to get off of crimes or peers to get off on crimes that they committed victimizing other people. So with that, I would encourage a no vote on this bill, just because I do see the intent, but I do see that it is a dangerous overstep. It is something that will definitely benefit juvenile offenders, it will benefit public defenders and juvenile defense attorneys, but it does not benefit our community and public safety, and it does not benefit law enforcement at all in the ability to hold people accountable and keep criminals off the street. Thank you.
Representative Hartsook.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have extensive experience, decades worth of interrogations. We have very specific rules that we have to follow, very specific laws that we have to follow. Does that mean some people break them? I would imagine some people do. We clearly see that in the papers, and then they are prosecuted accordingly. But we have existing laws and rules that we follow during interrogations. That's our job. We do that in conjunction with law enforcement. The case is tried in court. That's where they decide whether they're guilty or innocent. That's decided in court, not during the interrogations. The interrogations is the information gathering phase. That's where we are trying to get information, so if we're on the prosecution side, to determine the guilt. And we have to follow very specific procedures in how we gather that information. If we don't, then we are subject to laws for breaking those rules, and then we can be prosecuted. Laws and rules already exist. This bill wants to change some of those that we're following at a national standard. We have things that exist for a reason. They've been vetted for years and years. That's what we use. That's how we gather the information. And then when it goes to court, the prosecuting and defense attorneys argue out in front of the jury or the judge to determine the guilt or innocence. But in our piece on interrogations, we use the tools that are available. We do it according to the rules, and we should not change laws because there are unscrupulous or people that do things wrongly or illegally out there. Prosecute that person that breaks the interrogation laws and rules, not those of us that follow them, not those of us that adhere to them, that use it to gather the information. And it doesn't matter as a juvenile, as an adult, you follow the rules. Changing the rules to eliminate it because someone doesn't follow them is throwing, like the proverbial saying, the baby out with the bathwater. We don't need to get rid of something that works just because some people don't follow the rules. Those people need to be disciplined, not the whole crew. And we don't need to change the laws for interrogation accordingly. If every person that was arrested and interrogated told the truth, well, we probably wouldn't have a whole lot of need for the courts. But clearly they don't. People don't always tell the truth when they're arrested. They don't follow laws because they've been arrested or a crime's been committed. If everyone followed the laws and the rules that are out there, we wouldn't have crimes and we wouldn't need courts. But we need interrogation to gather information so it can be decided in the court of law. That's the court's purpose. The interrogation is to gather that information. We don't do it with illegal means. We don't do it with threats. We don't do it with violence because that's illegal. We follow the rules. We follow the law in our interrogations so we can gather the appropriate information to be used for the prosecution. And then the defense gets to see it too. But that argument as to guilt or innocence is determined in the court of law, not during the interrogation phase. That's where we gather the information. So we do not need a law that changes the existing rules that we follow and adhere to. If you have people that violate the current and existing laws, then prosecute them. Don't change it for everyone involved. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go Representative Marshall, then Representative Holtorf.
Colleagues, thanks for indulging me. I had not planned to come down to the well, but when I heard some statements, it did rile me up a bit. When we talk about hog-tying the police or taking tools away from their toolbox, in their ability to extract a confession from a juvenile, we have to remember that torture was always allowed for a long time as a tool in the toolbox, and it was only outlawed because it was unreliable. Not because it was against human rights, but because people would tell you anything if they were being tortured, and they found it was an unreliable tool in the toolbox. This goes directly to that issue. We have good evidence that we have a disproportionate number of false confessions when juveniles are lied to extract a confession. So we are not trying to take away the ability to enforce the law, we're trying to improve it. Because when you extract a false confession and you have an individual in custodial interrogation who you believe has already committed the offense, that is why they're in custodial interrogation, and you extract that confession and it turns out to be false, the real perpetrator of that horrible crime is still on the loose. And that real perpetrator of that crime could wind up being on the loose for decades because of using that unreliable tool. So when people say, oh, we have all these serious juvenile crimes, you're right. And so it becomes even more important at that moment in that custodial interrogation that the proper and correct tools are used and not just what we think is effective, but what we know is effective. During the committee hearings, it was almost embarrassing when some of the witnesses that are high law enforcement didn't even know that the bill was dealing only with custodial interrogations, or they did not know what a custodial interrogation was. They would give examples that fell completely outside the entire part of this bill that they could still use. And any creative police officer, and they will get proper training when this goes forward, they are just not allowed to factually lie. Hypotheticals are still fine. They can't tell the individual, we have video showing you did it, But I think they will be fine if they say, well, what do you think video would show? I think they would be fine. So taking that tool out is very important. And it's because of the reliability issue. When I was a young defense counsel, and this is to the bill because it goes to the reliability, I was able to read Barry Scheck's book when it came out on actual innocence. And he wrote in the foreword, and it will always stay with me, that the reason he wrote that book was because everybody was patting him on the back saying how terrific he was getting all these people who were actually innocent, not just not guilty, completely innocent, that were on death row, about 80 to 90 individuals, or sentenced to life. Everybody was saying how wonderful he was. And he's like, no one's looking at the reasons the unreliable system wound up with these people on death row or life in prison. And we need to look at those issues. Well, they have been looking at these issues for decades now, and they know that lying to juveniles leads to a disproportionate number of false confessions. And the International Association of Police Chiefs, when we say, well, we need to use standards, the International Association of Police Chiefs, for more than a decade, have recommended getting rid of lying to juveniles in custodial interrogation. Because just like someone being tortured who would tell you anything to make it stop, many, many juveniles will tell you anything to let them get out of the room, because as we all know, adolescents don't have a very good timeline when they're looking forward. It's usually the next 24 hours, if that they look forward. So I strongly recommend that we all vote yes on this bill. Thank you.
Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to my colleague from Douglas County for his comments. I will tell you that talking about torture in 2023 in the United States of America with respect to juvenile criminal activity and the detention and questioning seems a bit ridiculous. Doesn't happen. Now, one thing that's discounted here as we talk is the professionalism of law enforcement. Now, if lawyers are practicing and are not practicing in good faith when they know there's evidence or they're hiding evidence that proves innocence in the face of guilt, or vice versa, that proves guilt in the face of innocence, whether you're a prosecutor or defender, is a whole nother issue and probably beyond the scope of this bill. There are ethical standards for the lawyers that may or may not be followed in the judicial system. But with respect to law enforcement, I want to point out that there are Miranda rights. There are Miranda rights. There also is the opportunity to ask for legal representation. And when that ask is made, nothing happens as in our system the way I understand it. And the bill sponsors can correct me. I'm not a lawyer, never been a defense lawyer. But the interrogation stops until there is legal representation under our system. And under this custodial situation, the parents can also request that. The youth and or the parents can can request legal representation in any moment. That is our system. That is fair. The Miranda rights are very clear. I know they are read to both the juvenile perpetrators and the parents. Their legal rights are not infringed. There are many rights that are offered And that cannot be overlooked as we try to change the standards. That will not, I believe, affect the real problem. The real problem is crime in Colorado. The real problem is, what are we doing about crime in Colorado? What are we doing to stem the tide of crime in Colorado? This bill doesn't address that.
So let's stick to the bill, Representative.
Thank you for your leadership, Mr. Chair. Going back to the bill, as I pointed out, you can't overlook all of the things that I just spoke of that provide for representation, that are offered and afforded. And if they're not, then the law enforcement. There are also actions, as was stated by my colleague from Parker, Colorado, that affect those interrogators, that can be imposed on those interrogators or those investigators who are not following proper rules and procedures. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe there's going to be some amendments offered with regard to this, and I would ask for consideration and professional and honest dialogue about those opportunities, that we can find common ground with respect to our differences on this bill, House Bill 231042, Admissibility Standards for Juvenile Statements, trying to change the current standards in Colorado. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Holtorf. Always a pleasure to have respectful dialogue. Representative Bottoms.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I do want to urge a no vote to this bill, and here's some reasons I think might be important to this. As our colleague got up just a minute ago and he talked about the torture mentality, I think that's pretty important here because and this can go back, I mean, we even have seen studies all the way back into Vietnam where when torture happens, people give false testimony or there's a myriad of things that happens. And I agree with that for the potentially hundreds of thousands or even maybe millions of people that would include. I think that's legitimate statistical numbers. The problem with it being applied to this is since 1984, we've had one juvenile case. One that has we've realized has been a false statement coerced. So again, that number is one. So that means, yes, torture is going to cause a problem here, but the fact that there's only been one is proof that that is the opposite of what has been happening since 1984. Apparently, according to that statistical analysis, since 1984, we have been doing an amazing job with juveniles because one has been changed. So I do appreciate those statistics to help build my case here. Again, one juvenile that has been affected by this in a negative way since 1984. So to go back and try to change our laws here to make it easier or actually it handcuffs our officers to where they cannot really get down to the information. Now, all the other stuff that's been proven here with the police officers and everything, I'd like to throw something else out here that maybe we haven't processed. This is something that very, very rarely gets addressed in this chamber, which is the other effects. We try to bring this stuff up every now and then, but the other effects are usually the biggest effects. And that is if we say to law enforcement, who everybody here has proved, they're doing a very good job with this, and they're not coercing these juveniles into false testimonies. Again, one case. Because of that, if we make it more difficult for these law enforcement groups, agencies to actually ask some difficult questions, and again, they cannot do this without Mirandizing the juvenile without also Mirandizing the parents. The parents have to be part of this conversation. Nobody's getting tricked. This isn't like in a back closet somewhere where somebody's tricking these teenagers. That is not happening. That cannot. It's against the law for that to happen. So if that somehow does happen, it is an individual that is breaking the law to accomplish that. So how does another law change that? Okay? So with everybody there, then all of a sudden you're making it more difficult for these police officers to actually get to the truth. How does that affect the bigger picture? The next time either that same juvenile or a different juvenile is processing whether or not they're going to perpetrate a crime, if they know, well, it's going to be much more difficult for them to, and these are all the agencies, for them to actually ask me legitimate questions. It's going to be more difficult for them to process something, which again, it's already against the law. But if they think that this is a possibility for them to get away from prosecution, although they have done it, then what is the potential for these juveniles to accomplish more crime or to attempt more crime? Since juvenile crime is on an exponential rise right now, if we make it difficult for our police officers to question these juveniles, then obviously nobody would disagree with the fact that these juveniles are going to be more apt to commit crimes if they know it's easier in whatever circumstance, in whatever agency, being questioned by whatever group, that they may not have to have this testimony brought forward, or they can wiggle out of it this way. Now, there are some parts of this bill that I actually could kind of get behind. I like the fact that this potentially be videoed, because then nobody can lie about anything. But here's the thing with that is if we can't even ask them the questions that need to be asked, why video? If these are the 5 questions you can ask, or however, I don't know how this would limit it. I know it's going to limit it a lot. But if these are the list of questions you can ask, all they have to know how to do is answer those questions. Doesn't matter if it's being videoed. If they can have legitimate conversation from the police officers, if they can, and again, they have to be Mirandized, they have to have representation, they have to have the parents Mirandized. All of this stuff is part of the system. Knowing this, if they're going to have questions and legitimate interrogation, this is not torture. It was weird that you would even bring torture into the conversation except to prove my point. But the actuality that these juveniles could potentially be videoed, okay, if it's legitimate interrogation. If it's not a legitimate interrogation, you don't need videos. You can just say whatever you want to say. You've got your 10 questions, that's it. So if we're handcuffing the police officers here, we need to really think of all the exigent issues that are going to be happening, the corollary problems that are going to flow out of this. We are potentially, well, I don't think potential, I think this is an actual realized thing. We are developing legislation here that will encourage juveniles to continue the astronomical rise right now in juvenile crime. When do we stop this? We don't stop it by making it easier for juveniles to commit crimes. We're pulling an entire demographic into a dangerous situation by an encouragement mentality. Well, you can do this, and used to you'd get in really bad trouble, but now the police cannot even ask you certain questions. The police can't do this, they can't do that. If knowing that this stuff, the Mirandizing, making sure the parents are Mirandized, all this other stuff, if you know all that stuff is already the law, why does this bill even exist? If we know that the only people that would be doing harm to a juvenile in the interrogation context has to break the law to accomplish it, then what does another law do? If those bad guys, and those are bad guys, I'm not arguing against that, some of the investigators are not good guys, and they have horrible interrogation techniques. Now, again, since 1984, there's only been one case that's overturned for this. One. So why are we making a law that's not going to affect the guys that are going to try to do something wrong? And again, for me, if the only thing in the bill was the videoing, I'd vote for that. But there's too much extra stuff. There's too much things that make it difficult for the police officers. And the police officers, for the most part, and I know this is an opinion of mine, but the police officers, for the most part, are not trying to hurt these juveniles. They're not trying to attack these kids. They're trying to get the truth. There is a crime that has been committed, and we seem to even take that off the table. There is a real crime that has been committed by somebody. Is it this juvenile? Well, let's get to the bottom of that. If it's not that juvenile, then we will also get to the bottom of that. How do we do that? You do that through legitimate interrogation, and it needs to be challenging. It needs to be challenging for these juveniles. Again, I think one of the representatives already said this, but if you've got, if this juvenile committed the crime, they're not going to tell the truth about it. So you're going to have to get to the bottom of this. If the juvenile did not commit the crime, here's all the people that are in the room. The juvenile, the investigators that have already Mirandized the juvenile's representative, the parents that were Mirandized in the process of this so that you can have that representation in there. These are the people involved. So that somehow they're sneaking around and hiding this interrogation from people, it doesn't quite make sense. And in most interrogation rooms, there are cameras that are set up to record that. So we have all of these things that are involved, and so now we say, but let's make another law. Let's make another law that says you have to do all these things that you're already doing. Again, that doesn't quite make sense to me. I don't want any juvenile that didn't do something to go to jail. I don't want that to happen. Again, since 1984, there's been one case that's been overturned because of the incompetency of, or whatever the issue was with the investigator one. So I don't want any juveniles to go to jail. I've fought for that for years. I've gone to the court cases, to the juvenile detention centers for these juveniles. But I also know that juveniles do commit crimes. So potentially what this might do, now this is just a supposition, but if we enact this bill and it says, okay, then the juveniles fall into these categories, when these juveniles get to 16, 17 years old, we're going to start trying them all as adults because we cannot interrogate them properly as a juvenile. So somewhere in there, we're pushing an agenda that's going to be very unhealthy for these juveniles. We're going to cause an issue with these juveniles that will be a negative in the long run. Now, coming back to the idea of each of these juveniles making it easier for them to not have to tell you what's happened. And even there was a case that somebody mentioned earlier that even the parents eventually got in trouble for this. I can understand that when you're taking the responsibility away from the juveniles. Now, we have this opportunity to say, okay, and this is a declaration, I guess you could say, to society here that says, if you commit a crime, juvenile or not, if you commit a crime, you're going to be held accountable. Now, with the juvenile, of course, again, we can go through all of this again, but they already have all of these things in place that protect the juvenile in so many cases, on so many levels. And it would be against the law. A lot of the stuff that is supposed that potentially could happen, which is why the bill is introduced, can't happen because of the laws that are already in place. So one of the messages that we could send here, again, like a declaration, would be that, okay, juveniles, if you commit a crime, it's going to go very bad for you. There's going to be a lot of accountability. There are going to be consequences, going to be everything. Every time we take a consequence off the table, it causes crime to go up, because whatever the demographic, and we're talking about juveniles here, but whatever the demographic, they have more availability to commit that crime because the consequences are less. And they know,
One second, Representative Bottoms. Folks, it's getting a little loud in here. If we can just tune down just a little bit. Representative Bottoms, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm used to speaking over people and people that are asleep.
As much as I don't doubt it, back to the bill.
Touche. So, all right. That was funny. So,
1042.
yeah. So, when we're trying to have consequences for things, the juveniles need to know there's a consequence here. It's going to be difficult when you get taken before these investigators. Yes, you're going to have your representative. You're going to be Mirandized. You're going to have all these people in the room to protect you. But if you did the crime, these investigators are going to do everything they can to get to the bottom of this. If you didn't do the crime, here's the simple answer. You have nothing to be afraid of. Speak truth, you have nothing to be afraid of. But if you did the crime, it's going to be a difficult process, and it needs to be. The interrogation process needs to be difficult. That's the point of it. If we take the teeth out of this, then what's the point? Why do we even have an interrogation? We can give them the 5 or 10 questions, have them fill this out on paper, and move on. The reason we have the interrogation is because there are personalities involved. There are people involved. And these interrogators are good at what they do. Now, again, they can't do something like, well, this confession won't really mean anything, just sign it anyway. That's already against the law. You can't do something like that. So again, the idea that somehow we would put this bill up when everything in the bill is already been taken care of. We're wasting time. Not me specifically right now, but we're wasting time and energy and resources to try to accomplish something that is already taken care of. Why would we put money, time, energy, and people into this circumstance when it's already been taken care of? So now, coming back to the reality of this one individual, if there's anything, in my opinion, that proves long-term that we don't need this bill, is that there has been one juvenile since 1984 that we've seen this overturned. So what's the point? Where are the hundreds of people or the thousands of people that this bill will be saving? Where are the masses that we're going to spend time and energy on with this bill? The only thing that is affected here is not, according to statistics, it's not the juveniles that are going to be affected here. It's the investigators. It's the police departments. It's all of the people that are trying to and are put there and are paid to keep us safe and get to the bottom of crimes and hold people accountable for crimes. So the only demographic, statistically, that this seems to be addressing is police officers, investigators. If we could come up with anything in this bill that actually helps the juvenile population with actual truth and actual freedom and an actual investigative process, I haven't seen it in the bill. I read the bill over and over. We've been talking about this. Where does this help a juvenile, unless it's somehow maybe helping the juvenile not be accountable and responsible if they actually perpetrated the crime? So at some particular point, we have to say, okay, let's break this down, bill down paragraph by paragraph. Again, like I said, the only thing that I could get on board with is the videoing. I actually think it would be a good idea to have every juvenile videoed, but that actually happens quite a bit already. But if we say we want to video every juvenile, well, then we actually can see body language, we can see We actually get word for word what the investigator says. We get everything involved in the process so that we can actually come to the conclusion, is this legit? Do we need this? Is this crime been perpetrated? Did this juvenile do this? Why? We have it on video. We have every word, every statement from the investigators. We have every statement from the lawyer. We have every statement from the juvenile. So it can't be coerced. So I can get behind that part. But when we're trying to say, okay, guys, you don't actually have the ability to interrogate or any of that kind of stuff, I just don't understand this. Why are we encouraging our juveniles, why are we encouraging them to potentially have the desire to, or the excuse, I guess you could say, to go out and perpetrate more crime? Well, we're not going to be held accountable. I can get off this way, I can get off this way, this can happen over here. I've got a lot more to say, but I'm going to pause for just a little bit here so that I can get some water. But I'm going to pause just a little bit here and turn it over to somebody on some side. Unless...
Representative Evans. If the sergeants could remove the water from the chamber, that would be fantastic. Representative Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wonder if removing the water is a form of torture. So thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to address a couple of things that I've heard so far, and I think it needs to be unequivocally stated. No one is torturing juveniles. And torture is bad, not only from the ethical perspective of torture, but exactly for the reasons that my colleague from Douglas County mentioned, which is that torture does give false positives and false negatives. But that's not what we're talking about. That's not what this bill is talking about. This bill is talking about interview and interrogation techniques. And we need to have successful interview and interrogation techniques that result in uncovering the truth and being able to identify what actually happened in these situations. We need accurate information. And I think the data is clear. Since 1995, per information from the University of Michigan, we've had 11 false confessions overturned in Colorado. Only one of those false confessions since 1995 involved a juvenile falsely confessing to something. So our system is working. We are getting that accurate information. We're getting that accurate information through a wide variety of existing checks and balances and safeguards. Again, I think it's important to point out that before the interrogation that is talked about in this bill, before we even get to that point, by law, by Supreme Court ruling, both the juvenile and their parent or guardian have to be provided their Miranda warning, which I will read to you right now, just to refresh everyone's memory. Miranda warning: you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to talk to a lawyer and have him or her present with you while you're being questioned. If you can't afford to hire an attorney, one will be appointed to you. And they will represent you before any questioning occurs, if you wish. You can decide at any time to exercise these rights and not answer any questions or make any statements. Having read those warnings to both the juvenile and to their parent or guardian, then the question has to be asked. Do you, so to the juvenile and to the parent or guardian, do you understand each of these rights that have been explained to you? Having those rights in mind, do you still wish to speak? So there is an existing very robust protection that is in place to ensure that if legal representation is desired by the juvenile or their guardian, that information is, that representation is present. If that representation is requested, then the interrogation or the interview stops until a lawyer arrives to represent them. And I think it's also important to note that this bill talks about juveniles. Under Colorado law, juvenile in this particular context means between the ages of 10 and 17. Now, we talked about this in committee, and it's worth repeating. There is a huge difference in the development between a 10-year-old and a 17-year-old. And unfortunately, what we're seeing is situations where the older age range of our juveniles are unfortunately committing some terrible crimes. One particular one that I know of personally is the Jessica Ridgway incident. If you're unfamiliar with that case, Jessica Ridgway was a younger juvenile who was abducted, murdered, and dismembered by a 17-year-old. I'll say that again. Abducted, murdered, and dismembered by a 17-year-old. Somebody who does that to another person, that's a tough nut to crack. They're not just going to come out the second question that law enforcement asks and say, oh yes, I did it. I abducted, killed, and dismembered. I think Jessica was 10 years old when this happened. They're not going to come right out and say that. We have to have those tools to be able to gain the truth, having already presented Miranda warnings, having already gone through all of the other rules, policies, procedures, and safeguards in place to ensure that we don't get false positives and that we don't get false negatives. Because at the end of the day, truth is the most important thing here. Finding truth for folks like Jessica Ridgway's family. Finding the truth in some of these terrible crimes that occur. And so with that in mind and with that understanding, I move Amendment L007 and ask that it be displayed.
Amendment L007 has been moved and displayed. Representative Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what Amendment L007 says is that if a juvenile is being charged as an adult, adult interrogation admissibility standards apply. So what this amendment does is this recognizes cases like the one that I just talked about, where you have a juvenile that commits a heinous crime. And as a result of that heinous crime, existing standards and existing procedures in the law allow for that juvenile to be treated in a court of law as an adult. And so all this amendment does is bring House Bill 1042 in line with existing Colorado law, existing Colorado criminal procedures that already recognizes that there are times when a juvenile can be treated as an adult as a result of the severity of the crime that they committed. And so Amendment L007 provides that ability to gain high-quality interrogation and interviews that seek to uncover the truth in these heinous crimes, in these situations like happened with Jessica Ridgway, where a 17-year-old abducted, killed, and dismembered somebody else. This amendment ensures that law enforcement can get to the bottom of those situations and seek the truth so that not only is justice achieved for the victim and for the family of the victim, but the situation that my colleague mentioned earlier, where you don't want to catch the wrong person. You want to hold the correct person accountable. We have to make sure that we're finding and holding that correct person accountable. So with that in mind, I think it's just important to mention the severity of some of the crimes that would be addressed under this bill currently, and that Amendment L007 addresses. In the Jessica Ridgway case, 19 counts, 19 criminal counts, including first-degree murder after deliberation. Deliberation means they thought about this. They planned this. They were intending to do this for a significant period of time. Somebody that deliberates to commit first-degree murder is not going to just spill the truth in the first 5 minutes of a custodial interrogation. They've been deliberating this. It's literally a criminal charge that's recognized by the state of Colorado. And so ensuring that in situations where you have a 17-year-old who deliberately commits first-degree murder, Amendment L007 ensures that law enforcement and the criminal justice system have the ability to recognize the severity of that crime, to recognize the fact that the broader courts and criminal justice system have said that this juvenile can be treated as an adult for the purposes of the charges, and that that juvenile deliberated to do this. So, with that in mind, I ask for a yes vote on L007.
Is there any further discussion on L007? Representative Sharbini.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, colleagues, for the wonderful conversation we've been having. I would like to point that...
Mr. Sharbini, is your mic on?
I'd like to think so. I don't know.
Go right into it.
All right, let me...
There we go.
Thank you. Yeah, I got to speak up. Sorry, guys. The problem with this amendment is prosecutors are the ones that are responsible for charging cases. Officers would never know if the charge is going to come down as an adult while doing their interrogations. This would give them the ability to presuppose that somebody is already guilty of a crime they're going to be charged as an adult for when they're doing the interrogation, and allow them to circumvent this law. It theoretically guts the law. It puts the idea of guilty before innocent instead of innocent before guilty, and we're trying to protect kids from being abused by the system. So we ask that people vote no on this amendment and yes on the overall bill as it stands.
Representative Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, to my good colleague's point, this entire bill, House Bill 1042, governs admissibility into court. So the way a criminal case proceeds is officers are notified, become aware of this case, and they conduct their investigation. After the officers conduct their investigation, they have to make a decision, typically in conjunction with the district attorney's office, as to whether sufficient evidence exists to be able to charge a crime. If that crime is then charged, through the criminal justice process, through the court process, there are a wide variety of motions and other court proceedings that occur long before anything actually goes to a trial. You have things called preliminary hearings, where the courts review all of the information to ensure that probable cause did actually exist in order to charge this crime. Then, through the robust dialogue between prosecution and defense, you have a variety of motions that can then be brought. House Bill 1042 governs how those motions around the admissibility of juvenile statements are going to be governed. So my colleague is absolutely correct. An officer is not going to know at the time of the interrogation whether or not the juvenile will be charged as an adult or a juvenile. However, the entire bill is structured such that that question would then be handled in the court process through a motion filed by one of the parties to determine whether or not these statements that were collected should be suppressed under House Bill 1042. So, what this amendment does is it simply allows that dialogue that is already going to occur and that conversation that is already going to happen as a result of motions after a charge but before a trial. This allows the prosecution and the defense to have dialogue in that motion, which is required in order to implement House Bill 1042. It's already going to happen. You already have to have a motion in order to implement what House Bill 1042 is saying. This amendment, L007, is just saying that in that motion that will already occur, this is a consideration for the judge and for the prosecution to bring forth. So I agree with my colleague. The officers will not know at the time of the crime whether or not the alleged defendant is being charged as an adult. But the entirety of House Bill 1042 also applies during the motion process of the trial, which occurs after charges have been filed, in order to determine if the statements should be suppressed, and if so, under what legal authority. So for these reasons, I still ask for an aye vote on L007.
Further discussion on Amendment L007, Representative Bottoms.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am also asking for a yes vote on Amendment L007. And here is some of the reasons why. Most of you remember the 8 teenagers that a few years back took these, now 2 of them were adults, the rest of them were teenagers, and there were 8 of them that were sentenced for robbing and kidnapping an Arvada man and then throwing him onto US 36 in frigid weather while he was naked, according to a news release from the Jefferson County District Attorney's Office. Now again, as I'm reading through this, keep in your mind that when these teenagers come before the investigators that are going to be trying to get to the bottom of this, these teenagers eventually were tried as adults, right? This is what this amendment is specifically about, is if they're going to be tried as adults, there should be, if we're trying to stay consistent with the bill, think about what I'm saying. If we're trying to say that we want to protect juveniles in the interrogation process, guys, we've got to recognize that there is a difference between a 12-year-old and a 17-year-old, and how you even interrogate would be different with those different age groups. And so these perpetrators of the crime, again, 2 legal adults, 6 teenagers, 3 of the defendants who were under 18 at the time, they were all charged as adults. Well, how are we going to get to the bottom of this information? They're either juveniles. The bill says juveniles, okay? But if they're being tried as adults, then are they juveniles or are they adults? How are we going to process that when it comes to the interrogation? They have to be able to have certain abilities to get to the bottom of this information, right? The district attorney's office said that the 8 perpetrators lured the victim from his Arvada home under the pretenses of hanging out and smoking marijuana. When the victim met the group at the park, they took him to his house, where they forced him to reveal things that were being kept inside, that they stole the items away from him while his parents and siblings were asleep. When the defendants drove away, prosecutors said that the victim was still held captive, forced to strip naked, was repeatedly beaten, and pistol whipped. Now, we're saying that when these people come into interrogation, we can't ask them difficult questions, that there has to be all these criteria that are set up that are going to handcuff these investigators in the process. And again, I'm very much in favor of innocent until proven guilty, but I also don't want us to build a paradigm where the guilty cannot be found. And that's part of what this bill will accomplish. Later that night, the district attorney's office said the victim was shot in the leg and thrown out of the car on the Boulder Turnpike near Pecos Street. He was able to make his way to a hotel where the staff called 911 for help. The perpetrators, meanwhile, and these were teenagers, meanwhile returned to his home and stole a vehicle, as well as set fire to one of the cars they used in the kidnapping. Now, I'm not going to go through all of the different sentences and things like this, but if we're not careful, we're going to make it difficult to get to the bottom of these kind of cases, where these are some bad people doing some bad things. I have seen it, and I've actually experienced it, where you are thought to be the bad guy. I was driving a car that matched the description one time. You're thought to be the bad guy. And you're brought in and you're investigated, interrogated, and it was bad. It was horribly bad. And I had people ask me afterwards, well, aren't you upset they treated you that way? I wasn't upset that they treated me that way. And I told the police officers this. that, yeah, I would like to have done something else with my whole day, but if you end up catching the bad guy and you eliminate me in the process, then I'm okay with this. I had plenty of evidence of who I was. Well, if these teenagers are not doing something wrong, then they're going to have the ability to be able to speak that, again, with all of these people in the room. But if they're going to be tried as adults, then we need to be able to question them in these things. If we're really trying to stay consistent with the bill, this amendment actually makes sense. If the bill is trying to accomplish something else that we're not seeing, that's hidden here, that maybe is potentially helping people get away with crime, then we don't need this amendment. This amendment is irrelevant. But if we're trying to actually help juveniles, then this amendment makes total sense. Another story I'd like to tell you. This is from KDVR in Denver. It says a teen, and this is from just earlier this year, a teen is being charged as an adult in a shooting that killed a 16-year-old girl. According to the Denver District Attorney's Office, this individual, who was 17 years old at the time of the shooting, allegedly murdered this 16-year-old girl. On January 11th of this year, Denver Police Department officers responded to this shooting in Montbello neighborhood. They approached a car and addressed Cortez, and there was gunfire exchange. According to the arrest affidavit, Cortez was in the car with her older sister when her sister decided she wanted to sell some THC vape pens. The sister was going to sell the pens to a friend of a friend whom she had never met in person, but had his Snapchat. Now again, these are teenagers, okay? The friend sent the sister the address of where to meet, which was located in this neighborhood. According to the affidavit, once the sisters were in the neighborhood, they got lost, slowly driving near a park. This is when a teenage boy approached the car, pointed the gun at the sister's head. Sister threw the THC cartridges out of the car and began to drive away, but lost traction on the ice. The affidavit says that is when Cortez began hitting the suspect to get him to let go of the car frame. The suspect fired his gun. Once in custody, the sister was able to identify Sandoval as the suspect, and Sandoval was charged as an adult. Well, how are you going to get to the bottom of this information? This girl that's killed by this guy, we're never going to find that information out because we're not allowed to ask difficult questions and put them in pressure-type situations of interrogation. That's what interrogation is. So if they're going to be tried as an adult, there should be different rules. If we're saying that juveniles need to be protected, then we don't need to be protecting the adults. This bill isn't designed to protect the adults. It's designed to protect the juveniles. And if we're going to try them as adults, then they're no longer in the category of juveniles. And so we need to think through that process when it comes to this bill. And so in wrapping up, I am going to take a strong, positive stance on Amendment L007 and turn it over to one of my colleagues.
Before we do that, Representative Parenti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's an honor to serve with you.
An honor to serve with you, Representative Parenti.
Colleagues, some of you have heard me speak about my nephew who has been in prison for over 8 years for a crime he was not involved in. My family's experience in the criminal justice system has brought me to the conclusion that charging juveniles as adults, people who do not have fully developed brains, people who lack the known scientific biological capacity of judgment as fully grown adults, is a human rights violation. This amendment would encourage prosecutors and other members of the criminal justice system to charge more children as adults to allow for coerced statements to be admissible in court, and I strongly urge a no vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Esteemed colleagues, crime is on the rise. Lawlessness is on the rise. Juveniles are committing more crimes in our country and have over the last 3 years than probably in the last 10 years. You can see many shop owners on video where their stores are vandalized by juveniles, young people, potentially under 18 years of age. But as we talk about biology and development and how many people say that the brain is not fully developed till 25, biological, scientific facts that we need to hold to in so many areas, I will tell you that changing the juvenile standards in a time when juvenile crime is on the rise and lawlessness is on the rise is a mistake. Now let's talk about the worst crimes, because this is what this particular amendment speaks to as I speak to the amendment. Let's be very clear. If you commit the most heinous crime, or you are alleged to have committed the most heinous crime, you should be tried as an adult. There is no excuse. If you kill somebody, intentionally murder and take the life of someone, those are adult actions, not child actions. If you rape somebody, you physically sodomize another human being against their will. And then further, because of your guilt, you murder them. That is the most egregious and heinous affront against humanity that I think there exists, and that in those cases, you should be charged as an adult. And this amendment speaks to that. The victims who have no voice because they're dead don't get to speak. That matters. And this type of legislation, and we've seen this legislation before in this chamber. I've seen it in the last 3 years as we walk back law enforcement's ability, law enforcement's authority, and we continue to walk back judicial authority and abilities, only lead to more crime. My constituents are tired of it, Mr. Chair. Colorado's tired of it. In fact, the entire nation grows weary of crime. As we promulgate this type of legislation, do we proclaim that perpetrators or potential perpetrators of crime are the majority of cases, and therefore they absolutely need this legislation because there is so much egregiousness across this country?
Please stick to the amendment, Representative
Yes,
Holtorf.
sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, that's debatable, but back to this amendment. This amendment is so important. In fact, this is the most important amendment of the day with respect to this bill for me. And I will tell you, if you want to commit a crime that is an adult-level crime as a youth, you need to know what those are. And if you want to make that choice, because ladies and gentlemen, criminal activity oftentimes is a choice. You choose to steal. You choose to pick up a firearm and use it and discharge that firearm to harm somebody else. There is no excuse for making choices that are adult decisions that hurt or harm and cause the most egregious of actions against another fellow human. Now, I know many social justice warriors don't like hearing this, but I'll tell you, the people...
Representative Holtorf, Let's not impugn anyone. And we've had a really productive and respectful conversation so far, and I've really appreciated that. Let's keep on track.
Thank you for your leadership, Mr. Chair. I do appreciate you, and I appreciate you up there, and I appreciate your leadership.
I appreciate you. Back to the amendment, L007.
So, this amendment is spot on. It's laser focused on something that is very important. A juvenile being charged as an adult will have the same adult interrogation admissibility standards applied. They don't get the exception that is offered by this legislation, because this ties right back to the courts. It ties right back to the courtroom. And let's just say that somebody committed a crime, and oh, by the way, the language is very subjective with respect to what would be admissible under this bill. And
Please stick
this
to the
particular amendment says very clearly a very important point. And that very important point is that if you want to commit a crime that's a crime of an adult, then you are going to rise to that level under admissibility standards. This is so important because Colorado citizens and those victims want justice. They want justice for the crimes that are committed against them, whether you're a youth or an adult. But if you're going to commit an adult crime, if you're going to murder somebody, or you're going to rape somebody, or rape and murder somebody, or you're going to steal a vehicle and then run over somebody, or you're going to sell drugs that kill people, like fentanyl, and people die at your hand, and you're a youth peddling this poison in Colorado, then absolutely, you can have the same standards as an adult. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You want to act like an adult, then you can get treated like an adult. You want to make adult choices, then ladies and gentlemen, you can have adult standards in the criminal justice system. Thank you.
Winter is coming. Representative Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to echo the sentiments of my good colleague from Akron. My constituents also feel like that there's a whole lot of decriminalizing crime happening here in this building. We've seen the crime rates soar in this state. We've seen crime in all statistical areas reach the top. And I do agree with the fact is, if you do commit a crime as a juvenile and it's a heinous crime, you should be held accountable for that crime. If you do take someone's life by murder or by peddling poison, why should they get any type of a break? I told you once before that one of my other family businesses is we're funeral home owners. And there are many times that we deal with families that have lost a family member that have been a victim of crime. And when you sit across from those families and they're crying because they've lost a son and daughter, either being murdered or to drugs, and I will say that again, or to drugs, I would like you to be in that room with them. They want something done. And just because someone is a juvenile shouldn't mean that I should have to look across that table at a family member and say, I know that your son or daughter was murdered. I know they were killed by drugs peddled by this juvenile, but they shouldn't face any consequences. There are bad actors out there. And if you don't think that a juvenile, in 1 minute we'll say that children are highly intelligent, but then in the next instant, we won't say that a juvenile's cunning enough to game the system. I remember when I was a young kid, we played a lot of games, and if you don't think that these juveniles that are bad actors and that have bad intentions will gain the system so they know they will not be prosecuted as adult, then you're kidding yourself. We need to hold people accountable for committing crimes. We are too soft on crime, and it's not solving the problem. I will say that again, it is not solving the problem. As crime rates soar, it is not solving the problem. I ran on trying to stop crime in Colorado, and I will leave with this. We should all get bored on, if you commit a crime in the state of Colorado, you should be punished, and especially for a heinous crime. And if you're a juvenile and you commit a heinous crime, you should not get that get out of jail free card, and you should be punished as an adult. Because at the end of the day, as a funeral director, I have sat across from these families that have victims. And it's a damn shame that we're not standing up for those victims and their families. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on L007? Representative Armagas. Representative Armagas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As far as where we're going with the ability to charge a juvenile, as an adult, these are only for heinous crimes. We're not talking about simple petty offenses or anything like that where it can be charged as a juvenile or an adult. We're talking about people that are close enough to the age that commit something heinous as of the act of murder that are being charged as an adult. I think this is something that should easily be added. As we work on clarification for this, I want people to understand from the enforcement's perspective, this is something that gives the teeth to apprehend and detain a juvenile that commits a heinous offense. So this is something that is an easy addition to the bill that helps modify and increase the understanding of where it's trying to go with things that are loosening if this bill passes without these amendments. Thank you.
Any further discussion on L007? Representative Bottoms.
Again, to L007, I would like to encourage all of us in here to vote yes on this amendment. Again, if the desire or the intention of the bill is toward juveniles, then why would we not want to separate that? To be able to say that there's other things that can potentially happen. When you have, I think one of my representatives over here said this, but if I may be wrong, so let me say it again much better. If you do crimes that are specifically adult level type crimes, then you need to be held accountable for that. Now, this bill is not to the accountability of it, but it's to the interrogation of it. The amendment is to separate those two factors, to separate those two demographics. If you're trying to interrogate a juvenile, then, and again, juvenile can mean a lot. I think we've already established this, but juvenile can be from a young kid, and kids actually do perpetrate some pretty big crimes, all the way up to what we're looking at 16, 17-year-old that are in the same category, and we're trying to interrogate them. There's no way that an interrogator is going to interrogate a 10-year-old the same way that they're going to interrogate a 17-year-old. Now, again, everybody is in the room that needs to be in the room, right? You understand that the lawyers, all this stuff, we keep acting like that there is some kind of vacuum here, that this juvenile is brought into this, this place where they're all alone, they're by themselves, and you got this mean interrogator or group of interrogators that are tricking this juvenile. I don't understand where that picture is coming from, because that's not possible. That is not a legal possibility right now when it comes to juveniles already. So the idea is we need to make sure that we're wrapping our mind around what is actually happening, and that is that you have a juvenile come in there, but that juvenile is surrounded by people that are helping protect that juvenile. Even if the interrogator was trying to deceive them into some false commitment that they made, that they did something wrong. Even if that was possible, which is not, it's just not happening. I think I've already gone over those statistics. That is just not happening. So that is not the case. You've got all these people, but now you've got, and I read some earlier stuff about the actual crimes that are being perpetrated by these 16-year-olds. Well, how do we get to the bottom of that? That's something I think should be discussed. I think somewhere the people that put the bill together and submitted this bill, somewhere they have to ask those questions. I mean, answer those questions or address or do something. How do we get to the bottom of what's actually been done if we're handcuffed so much by trying to get to the bottom of what has actually been done? How do we do this? What would be a procedure that that somebody would agree with and say, this is how we can get to the truth? It seems like right now everything we're throwing out here and presenting takes us farther away from being able to get to the truth. We've got some very heinous people that are being tried as adults, but we can't get to the truth. We can now, and I think we've been fairly successful at that, but this bill will actually make it more difficult for that to be accomplished. So when can we actually get to the truth for teenagers that are being tried for adult crimes? It's interesting to me that we have a lot of discussion on the ability of these juveniles to make practical, cogent decisions, that they are too young to make decisions. So these interrogators come in there and they trick them because they're too young to make decisions. Although they potentially just made a major decision to commit a crime, but they're too young to make decisions. They can make decisions about pretty much everything else that I would argue should fall way above 18 when it comes to all of the life social issues, but for crime, interrogation of crime, they're too young to make decisions. This is pretty duplicitous. It's not. It doesn't make sense where somebody will come up here and argue they're too young to deal with this, so we need to have this bill, and then has argued 10 different other bills where the children are old enough to make these decisions. That's not a legitimate argument. It has to be consistent. Somewhere we have to have some consistency. These juveniles are either old enough to make decisions or they're not old enough to make decisions. And I would say perpetrating a heinous crime is a pretty big decision being made by a demographic. So how do we as the people of Colorado that are investigating this, how do we get to the bottom of what's actually happened? Do we assume that they can make decisions, they cannot make decisions? Well, if they're going to be tried as an adult, why can't we just put this amendment in there? And then, if they're not capable of making life decisions that are going to affect them their entire existence, which is what all of our other bills in this House do, why can we not do this with this bill? Hold them accountable. Why is that a bad idea? And then if they haven't done it, you've got all those people in there. You've got the lawyers. You've got the investigators. You've got the parents know about this. Everybody's involved. So why can't they make that decision? Why can't they answer some questions from an investigator that's trying to get to the truth? If the investigator can find the truth, we can actually potentially, and I think this is a little bit of a stretch under our current trajectory as a state and as this body, but we could actually potentially start curbing some crime among juveniles. But the more we handcuff the investigators, the more difficult that becomes. In fact, it doesn't become difficult, it pretty much near becomes impossible. So I think this amendment, again, I feel like I might be belaboring this point just a hair, but I think that this amendment makes sense. It kind of goes with the bill. This bill is about juvenile investigation and interrogation. So let's make sure we separate those two things and make it possible for these perpetrators to actually be interrogated and investigated in a what is already a good and legal way. Let's try to push that a little bit. So again, I'm speaking toward Amendment L007, and I think this should be voted in pretty much just as it stands. I think it needs to be voted in. So I stand in favor of L007.
Thank you. The committee will stand in a brief recess. The committee will come back to order. Is there any further discussion on Amendment L007? Seeing none, members, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L007. All in favor say aye. All opposed say no. The noes have it. L007 is lost. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move House Bill 1042 as amended to the end of the calendar.
House Bill 1042 as amended will be laid over to the end
Special
of
orders calendar, excuse
will
me.
be laid over to the end of the special orders calendar by the request of the Majority Leader. Mr. Shebel, please read the title of the next bill, House Bill 1179.
House Bill 1179 by Representatives Morrow and Winter, also Senators Henriksen and Simpson, concerning the maximum uncommitted reserve that may be retained in the Agricultural Products Inspection Cash Fund.
Representative Winter. Just kidding, Representative Morrow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members. I am here to present to you House Bill 1179, which is simply said it's a fee stabilization measure for fruit and vegetable farmers. So that puts it very simply. It's a very boring bill. You should all enjoy it. And I'm going to let you do the amendment. Oh.
Be that as it may, Rep. Morrow, I need you to move the bill.
Oh, I move the bill. I move the bill. 1179.
Excellent. Representative Winter.
Thank you. I would like to move amendment L001 to House Bill 1179 and ask that it be displayed.
Amendment L001 has been moved and displayed. Representative Winter.
This is a simple amendment. All it's doing is changing the safety clause to petition clause.
Any further discussion on Amendment L001?
I would just ask for an aye vote.
Seeing none, members, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L001 to House Bill 1179. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. The ayes have it. L001 passes. To the bill, Representative Winter.
Thank you. So I would ask for an aye vote on this bill. This is going to help our vegetable producers. In my district, we got great Rocky Ford cantaloupe and watermelon. Also, we have great Pueblo green chili and produce out on the mesa. And this is really going to help us keep providing good quality produce to not only Coloradans, but people around us. Let's keep shipping a good product out of Colorado. I appreciate an aye vote.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, members, the question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1179 as amended. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. The ayes have it. 1179 as adopted passes. Mr. Shebel, please read the title of the next bill. Senate Bill 50.
Senate Bill 50 by Senators Simpson and Roberts, also Representatives Holtorf and McCormick, concerning modifications to the Colorado Agricultural Future Loan Program and in connection therewith modifying the eligibility requirements for the program and eliminating the repeal date for the loan program.
Thank you. Representative McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What am I doing? I move Senate Bill 21-248.
How about Senate Bill 50?
That was an old bill. Sorry, we already passed that one. I move Senate Bill 23050.
To the bill, Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's an honor to be standing here with the chairwoman of the Agricultural, Livestock, and Water Committee. That's the old name. Now they changed the name. I apologize. There's a new name. Ag, Water, and Natural Resources Committee. Thank you. Presenting this bill. It's a bill that has come out of the Colorado Department of Agriculture to expand those that are eligible to participate in the Colorado Agricultural Loan Program. It was noted that there are many agribusinesses that would not qualify, and this corrects that and allows qualification of advanced technology such as drone technology in agriculture that may be an agribusiness that could qualify. That is one example. So we're excited about promoting technology, processes, and other developments in technology to the benefit of farmers and ranchers in Colorado. And I believe that's what this bill does. It also removes the repeal of the loan program so it can be a continuous program within the Colorado Department of Agriculture.
Representative McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, and this bill also clarifies that loan applicants that will become farmer or rancher or in an ag business will be eligible, whereas before it was those that were in the business less than 10 years, and also expands the eligibility to those that will earn a majority of their revenue from processing. And it is an expansion of our bill from 2 years ago, which was Senate Bill 21-248, which put $30 million of grant and loan money into this fund, which most of it is loan money, which will be continually repaid and continually loaned out again so that we can really help grow the pipeline of farmers and ranchers and those in agribusiness into the future, since so many of our farmers and ranchers are reaching retirement age. We need to do all that we can to get more into the business, and I urge an aye vote on the bill.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, members, the question before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 50. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it. Senate Bill 50 passes. The committee will stand in a brief recess. The committee will come back to order. Mr. Shebel, please reread the title of House Bill 23-1042.
House Bill 1042 by Representatives Bacon and Charbini, also Senator Gonzalez, concerning narrowing admissibility standards for juvenile statements to protect the voluntariness of such statements.
Representative Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Amendment L015 and ask that it be displayed.
L015 has been moved and properly displayed. Representative Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what this amendment does is it recognizes that best policies and practices are always evolving, and those best policies and practices are contained in typically national model policies. And so this amendment just encourages law enforcement agencies to adopt and follow those national model policies that are also going to reflect the post rules concerning law enforcement conducted interrogations involving a juvenile. Good amendment, vote yes.
Representative Charbini.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would encourage a yes vote on this one. It is good to encourage our law enforcement to follow nationalized training, and this will encourage them to do so. And I thank the other side for cooperating with us and working with us. So please vote yes.
Thank you, members. Is there any further discussion on Amendment L015? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L015. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. The ayes have it. L015 is passed. Back to the bill. Any further discussion on 1042? Seeing none, Representative Holtorf.
I'd like to thank the bill sponsors for working with members of my caucus that are involved in law enforcement. I think that we are trying to find solutions and find middle space, and I sincerely appreciate the consideration you give as we work in this chamber. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Members, seeing none, the question before us is the passage of House Bill 1042 as amended. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. House Bill 1042, the ayes have it. 1042 as amended is passed. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
You have heard the motion. Seeing no objection, the committee will rise and report. Good job, folks.
The House will come back to order. Mr. Shebel, please read the report of the Committee of the Whole.
Madam Speaker, your Committee of the Whole begs leave to report it has under consideration the following attached bills, being the second reading thereof and making the following recommendations thereon. House Bill 1042 is amended, 1179 is amended, passed on second reading and ordered, engrossed and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 50 passed on second reading and ordered, revised, and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage.
Representative Woodrow. The motion before us is that the House adopt the report of the Committee of the Whole. There are no amendments at the desk. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Representative Soper is excused. Please close the machine. With 43 ayes, 16 no, and 6 excused, the report of the Committee of the Whole is adopted. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to proceed out of order for consideration of Senate amendments to House bills.
Seeing no objection, we will proceed out of order for consideration of Senate amendments to House bills. Madam Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move to lay over House Bill 1101 until tomorrow.
Seeing no objection, House Bill 1101 will be laid over until tomorrow. Mr. Shebel, please read the title of House Bill 1134.
House Bill 1134 by Representatives Joseph and Kipp, also Senator Cutter, concerning mandatory provisions in home warranty service contracts and in connection therewith, requiring a home warranty service contract to include terms allowing a homeowner to replace any of certain gas fuel devices with a device that operates on electricity.
Representative Joseph.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the House concur in Senate amendment to HB 1134.
Thank you, Representative Joseph. Representative Kipp.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So while ordinarily I do not agree with concurring with the Senate, some amendments were put on in the Senate to clarify the intent of the bill, so we are willing to concur. And we ask for a yes vote.
Thank you. Seeing Representative DeGraff.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just have a few things with the bill. Just some of the language. Gas burns clean. Right now, the language says energy efficient electric appliances. Right now, the electrical footprint, the pollution footprint is twice that of gas. Fossil fuel production are two of the largest contributors to ozone.
Representative DeGraff, is
Yes,
this
ma'am.
to the amendments?
No,
that are
this
part
would
of-
be to the bill. I thought we were on the bill. Sorry about
No, this is to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill
Oh, I'm good.
1134.
that. Thanks.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, the motion before us is to concur with the Senate amendments on House Bill 1134. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Please close the machine. With 59 ayes, 0 no, and 6 excused, the motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 1134 is adopted. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the repassage of House Bill 1134 as amended.
Representative DeGraff.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would request a no vote on this legislation. It's something that industry can address, the free market can and does address. It's not something that's needed for legislation. The premise for this is about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and currently that is not the case, as the footprint for producing electrical energy is twice that of gas. Gas is a hydrocarbon. It burns into carbon dioxide and water vapor. You can get a filter for your house if you want to. Gas burns very clean, as my colleague discussed this morning. Fossil fuel production are the largest contributors of ozone and poor air quality. 70%, we've had briefings on this several times, over 70%, if not 75% of our ozone issue comes from overseas, just like those Chinese red balloons, or come up the upslope. So this is addressing a problem. About indoor air quality, say those studies are iffy at best. Over 97% of, and this talks about our goals, 97% of our greenhouse gases are at least our water vapor, and the contribution of ours is less than 1/10 of about 100th of a percent. So the bill overall is unnecessary. It's the industry will take care of it. It's unneeded legislation, and just something that we should not be doing in this House. I urge a no vote on this bill.
Seeing no further discussion, the question before the House is the repassage of House Bill 1134 as amended. Mr. Schiebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Please close the machine. With 44 aye, 15 no, and 6 excused, House Bill 1134 as amended is repassed. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Members, any further announcements? Representative Taggart.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's an honor to serve with you, and could I have a personal privilege?
Yes, thank you, Representative Taggart.
Please, you make me nervous when you stand up. This morning I got caught off guard by a bill that I care very deeply about being pushed out to July. I don't want to speak on that the movement of that, but I do want to bring to your attention the importance of this bill. The bill number is 1114. I introduced it along with Representative Gonzalez Gutierrez, and this bill is all about first-generation students. And the reason first-generation students are important is because in many areas of this state, while the the Commission on Higher Education put out a 10-year goal of 66% of our adults having some form of a higher education certificate, whether it be a certificate, a 2-year degree, a 4-year degree, or a graduate degree, as many of us have. In areas of the state, and in a particular area of the state that I come from, 66% is not achievable because we only have 34 to 35% of our adult population. And those institutions that have put a tremendous amount of energy and investment into helping those first-generation students, I just wanted those institutions to be recognized. Because, I hope this isn't bad language, because they've done a hell of a job. In the case of CMU, Colorado Mesa University, who, for those of you that don't know that acronym, 50% of their graduates last year were first-generation students. Let me repeat that, 50%. And the only way institutions in rural areas and in dense metropolitan areas are going to get to 66%, we need to recognize them. And we need to recognize them for their work. And I will point out the bill was hijacked by a couple of universities that had the audacity to say to me that my intent was to change the funding formula. That was never my intent. And one person had the audacity to say that to my face. And I said to him, "You're talking to the person who wanted this to go through. And I have never talked about funding and changing the funding formula. I strictly wanted to designate these schools such that first-generation students who are not quite certain if they're going to be welcomed into a particular university have a way of seeing this particular school is focused on first generation, not at the expense of schools that are focused on medicine or engineering or veterinary services. They are focused on first generation. So you have not heard the last of this bill because I'm going to bring it back, and we need to support these institutions with a designation that are so focused on helping these first generation students because we need them in this 21st economy, and we need to help them from the standpoint of helping them boost their own earnings. So again, please remember this bill, and I thank you.
Thank you, Representative Taggart, for your passion for the first-generation students of our state. We look forward to next steps on your work. Representative Amabile.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to say one more time, business is meeting in, we're going to make it now 5 minutes because we're a morning committee, downstairs in the usual place. We're going to be hearing one bill, and I would love everybody to get down there as fast as possible. Thank you.
Representative Weissman.
Thank you. Judiciary Committee members, I think everyone knows, as an afternoon committee, we cannot start until all of the morning committees are done. I will try to keep in touch with folks on text. Plan to start, within 10 minutes after we all get notification that the on adjournment committees are concluded. We'll see when that is. Same room 112, same agenda that I announced this morning. Thanks.
Representative McLaughlin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Education Committee, 5 minutes, and we will see you down there. And we have 2 bills, but a lot of people to testify today, so we want to make sure we get through before midnight. Thank you.
Representative Kipp.
Energy and Environment Committee members, since you have to go across the street, you have 8 minutes. If you have time, everybody stop in 109 in the basement and grab a lunch from CSG West.
Great. Seeing no further announcements, Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to lay over the balance of the calendar until tomorrow.
Seeing no objection, the balance of the calendar will be laid over until tomorrow. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the House stand in recess until later today.
Seeing no objection, the House will stand in recess until later today.